What's up, Dodger fans? Welcome back to another live episode of Talkin Blue. I am Cody Snavely here with my co-host Vince Imperio, and we've got a packed one today. Clayton Kershaw is officially gearing up to pitch for Team USA in the upcoming World Baseball Classic, and then we got a bunch of Kyle Tucker news and rumors that just refuse to go away. Um, Other than that, we got some spring training report dates. All that is going to be discussed today, along with whatever comments and questions we get. Easiest way to join the conversation is dropping a super chat in the YouTube live comment section. That's where Vince and I will be able to read it right away. If you're watching it after the live, still feel free to join the conversation. Let us know what you think about the Kyle Tucker rumors, Kershaw coming out. But Vince, it's been a week now, still kind of churning on the rumors that we've had around the Dodgers and kind of the MLB free agency right now, but it seems like things are getting really hot. Are you gearing up and getting ready for some of these free agents to finally, feels like what we've been saying every week, to the drop off the board?
Yeah, we're waiting for the dominoes, and we got a couple of them. Alex Bregman, with the Cubs. We got Ranger Suarez to the Red Sox. Seemingly, Kyle Tucker at one point, they said Wednesday, they said Thursday. You're almost done with Thursday. We're just about done with Thursday, and still nothing. So, but yeah, I'm ready for it. Whether it's the Dodgers or not. The good thing about it, the way kind of where we're sitting right now, is if none of these guys end up signing with the Dodgers, we're still fine. And if not, we're still fine.
But before we get into all the stuff with Kyle Tucker, I feel like we should kind of get the Dodgers news out of the way first. I think the biggest one today that involved the Dodgers somewhat was Clayton Kershaw pitching for Team USA. Kind of came as a surprising shock for a lot of people, myself included. If you remember back in 23, he really wanted to play and participate in the tournament that season. Obviously, the insurance and all that, debacle, he ended up opting out of the tournament. Now with him being a free agent, retired, no team, no insurance plan needed, he's going to join Team USA. They announced on social media, Mark DeRosa spoke on MLB Network about it, and Kershaw also spoke to about the situation he's in right now as well. So we got a little bit over about 2 months until the international tournament begins. But Vince, how surprised were you when you saw Clayton Kershaw, come up and saying that he's going to be participating in the WBC?
Yeah, surprised in the sense that it happened. Not surprised after the fact that he's doing it. Like it makes sense for him. He wanted to do it, didn't get to do it. Doesn't have all the attachments to him now in terms of like said insurance and worrying about the Dodgers and all that type of stuff. And he kind of mentioned what the role is, and it's a basically kind of how he was in the postseason for the Dodgers. He could come in and pitch a big inning or a big out like he did in the World Series, or he could come in and some type of mop up duty to save arms like he did in the Wild Card Series. I mean, Kershaw's there. This guy, I mean, you think about how he went out. He went out 1 year and joined a World Series championship, not a part of it. He goes out being part of a World Series champion, getting a big out in that, and being part of the regular season. And then now he gets to go, like Team USA stacked. He gets to go play, enjoy the vibes, and yeah, USA is probably the favorite right now, just based on the roster that they have, and even though Japan's won it last time and has won it in the past with not as many MLB guys, but Kershaw might just ride off into the sunset a little bit nicer than he did already.
Yeah, I mean, Kershaw even spoke about it on MLB Network. If no one got to watch that, we did post that interview on our YouTube channel. Andy McCullough, who's been very close with Kershaw in the past, wrote a whole book about him. If you haven't read that one, that's a good read as well. He had an interview, a short one on The Athletic today, kind of breaking down what Kershaw's decision and what his role is going to be for the team. It's going to be very similar to like what you said. He'll probably come and pitch out of the bullpen. He'll probably eat innings in case if the USA is getting smashed or if they're doing the smashing to another country. So I imagine that's what we're going to see. Maybe one or two appearances at most, I would say, from Kershaw. Basically a hybrid player manager right now. He was surprised. He thought when DeRosa, called and picked up the phone, and he thought he was going to be asking him to join the coaching staff, but no, he said, no, I want you to join as a player. And now I think there's like one or two roster spots remaining for Team USA. And I got to agree with you. this roster for Team USA is probably the best it's ever been in the tournament. It seems like every week, there's more and more star players being added. Alex Bregman just recently joined as well. I know a lot of Dodger fans don't like the name, but you got to respect the player that he is. And, he is one of the best players in baseball, especially in the infield. So he's joining it. Kyle
Byron
Tucker
Buxton the other day.
Byron Buxton announced that he's going to be joining. Still got PCA in the mix. I mean, who's to say if Kyle Tucker signs with the team and then he just announces that he's going to be playing? It seems like they're really pulling out all the stops this time around. And I think 2023 was a big step forward for the tournament because it seemed like a lot more players were involved, interested, and were kind of taking it more seriously than they have in the past. Because even the year that the United States won, there really wasn't too many star players on the team. You could probably say Nolan Arenado was probably the one guy on there. A lot of the other guys that were on that team are no longer in the league due to age or just falling off a cliff. So I really do like Team USA's chances right now. All the gear dropped on Fanatics as well. So I feel like we're looking at a really good tournament here in the next 2 months.
Yeah, I'm excited. I've already said on here that I've been to at least one game in almost everyone. I don't know if I get to go to one this year, but it's fun. The fact that everyone's starting to buy into it, specifically U.S. I think most other countries had bought into it. As long as teams allowed their players to go. Now that the U.S. is in, that creates a little bit of an enemy or a little bit of competition. Where now maybe more guys from the other countries want to play, and it just makes for a really fun tournament. Last time, it's going to be hard to top that ending of Ohtani versus Trout. But it could be a new winner, could have some fun, and good competitive baseball when we're watching Max Muncy play 5 innings and come out of the game, and we're seeing a lot of guys that some people are excited for, but you might not necessarily know who they are.
Last kind of like segue on Kershaw here. I have seen a few comments on social media, Facebook, Twitter, all that stuff, kind of saying some Dodger fans feeling a little slighted where the end of his career isn't going to be, that last out, on the mound in game 3 of the World Series. Do you feel any certain type of way? Or are you really like truly saying, what, I've never seen Kershaw pitch for Team USA. He seems excited, so I'm excited too. Or do you feel like some of these Dodger fans kind of feel, you can vindicate their I wouldn't say like anger, but like kind of just saying, man, he had the ultimate way to go out on top. Why would he come back, try to pull a Brett Favre kind of?
Yeah, honestly, didn't even think about that. Yeah, obviously, if he comes in and doesn't do well or has like the game, like the Reds game in the wild card round, I wouldn't be as fun. But I know realistically, in 20 years, when someone mentions the name Clayton Kershaw, you're probably going to remember him getting that out in the World Series, regardless of whatever he does in the World Baseball Classic, just based on, that's just the nature of it. As big as the World Baseball Classic has gotten, it's not quite up there yet with like regular season, postseason lore of MLB.
Yeah, so we'll see Clayton Kershaw. We'll see what his role is in the next couple of months. I'm curious to see if he just shows up at Dodgers spring training camp and just starts throwing the ball around a little bit. Speaking of spring training, it's a good segue to where we're going to go right now. Pitchers and catchers report dates have been officially announced. February, Friday, I believe the 13th is the first official workout for pitchers and catchers. A couple days later on the 17th or on the 17th is when the entire squad joins. Obviously, if you've covered the Dodgers or watched the Dodgers over the last 10 years or so now, a lot of these players show up, days or even weeks earlier. A lot of them live in Arizona and they work out the Camelback Ranch year round. Then you also got the guys like Shohei Ohtani, Max Muncy, who have been reportedly at Dodger Stadium pretty much the entire offseason working on things. So those guys are grinders. They're getting ready to go and embark on a three-peat. How excited are you for spring training just to be a little bit less than a month away?
Yeah, I'm excited. I mean, it's the start of a new season. The Super Bowl is February 8th, and then that Friday, the Dodgers start reporting. And like you mentioned, we're probably going to see everybody, the Dodger social media, when they have the entrances, the guys get there like 6 in the morning or whatever it is. Like, we're going to see everybody there. It'll be, I'm sure it's fun for them to kind of think about, we don't have to travel, overseas this year. We don't have to, kind of speed everything up. We don't have to get there a little bit earlier than they have in the past. And, it'll just be a normal spring training for once. World Baseball Classic will cut into a little bit of that, but there's not too many guys on the Dodgers participating in that to where it would really be a detriment. Or I guess there's a handful, but nothing that's going to be a detriment to anything. So yeah, I'm excited. It's the start of a new season. You enjoy the World Series as they come, and we've enjoyed these last two for sure. And then you get to think about what's going to happen in 2026. And what I'm kind of excited about from here to then is obviously if the Dodgers sign anybody else, but some of the non-roster invitees. There's really not too many spots available on the Dodgers, but every year there's an intriguing name that even if he doesn't end up making the roster, it's just fun to watch him for a couple of weeks rake or pitch very well for the Dodgers.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see what happens in terms of, how much playing time some of these minor league guys get. The World Baseball Classic, that opens up opportunities for a lot of other players to kind of get their run to play. The Dodgers don't have too many players participating in the World Baseball Classic this time around. Freddie Freeman is the other guy that, nobody's really talked about this offseason. He just officially announced, or it was reported that he just withdrew from Team Canada due to personal reasons. I remember a couple weeks back, or about a month or two ago, they said there was due to an injury or a surgery or a procedure that he underwent that was never disclosed to the public. So it's kind of just, looking to see what happened with Freeman there. I'm sure we'll get more clarity as the team breaks for camp. But you're going to get opportunities for guys that wouldn't have gotten that in a traditional spring training, and for the most part, it is a traditional spring training for the Dodgers, back-to-back years that they opened the MLB season overseas, in Japan in last season, and then in Korea the year before that. So now you're getting to go report to camp, play a full spring training, and then open the regular season in the United States, especially coming off back-to-back World Series. They've already talked about, how fatigued that they were at the end of last year, the grind that it takes to not just play 162 games, but to go all the way through the gauntlet of October and back-to-back years. And we already talked about how long this past season was, ending in November. So we'll see how the team gets ready and gears up for spring training. It is an exciting time. I'm curious to see how many, Dodger fans in Los Angeles area are still have their minds on football. This is the biggest anomaly to me. You got some San Francisco, 49ers fans that wear Dodger blue. You got the Raiders fans, like I believe yourself. You got the Rams fans because they're back. There's a little bit of everything in the melting pot in terms of the NFL world. All those teams minus the Raiders are still involved right now in the NFL playoffs. So we'll see what the Rams do this weekend against the Bears. But yeah, spring training is a great time. Awesome to get the season. I'm surprised how fast it came. The offseason, even though a lot of these guys haven't signed, it just feels like November came and they won the World Series, and now we're here getting ready to, start the spring training ramp up in February.
Yeah, one note on spring training, and kind of you mentioned the young guys that can kind of find their role. Will Smith is playing for Team USA, so that opens up pretty much, a lot of at bats for Dalton Rushing. That's probably a good thing. He's a guy that last year never found his footing offensively. And, if he's getting some consistent at bats throughout the spring and then starts getting consistent at bats in the regular season, we can really see what he can do offensively. And that's exciting too.
Yeah, good points. New faces will be at Dodgers camp this year, as always, with the non-roster invitees and then whatever free agents that they do sign. The Dodgers were active last week in terms of free agent signings and on the waiver wire. The first one, they brought in Ryan Fitzgerald. They ended up DFA'ing him later for another move that was just made official this past week, and that is Andy Ibáñez, who signed, I believe, a $1.2 million deal. He has no minor league options, so he cannot be optioned down to AAA, AA, whatever. So he's pretty much guaranteed a roster spot unless he's cut in spring training. Going with him first, he is from Detroit. He was non-tendered in November, probably due for the roster flexibility issue with not having any options and not having really a set spot. Utility infielder, can play, second base, third base, shortstop, possibly the outfield if they want to put him there. Your thoughts on the move? Do you think it impacts any future signings like of a Kike Hernandez, or do you just think this is kind of a placeholder until guys like Edman, and if they re-sign Hernandez, are back fully and healthy?
Yeah, when I first saw the signing, it was you start thinking of a bunch of different questions of, okay, why? What do they know? What do they like about them? What do they see? And you go to the other side of it. Well, maybe Kike or Edmund told them, hey, well, maybe it's going to be a little bit longer into the season before I'm fully ready. They have, or maybe they don't believe in Haesung Kim, or they don't. Miggy Rowe is a guy that can break down at any point. So you kind of just want to have that depth. And like we've mentioned before, they don't have necessarily too much depth in the minor leagues. You have Alex Freeland, who could have a role too, but he's another left-handed hitter. So you don't know what the whole process is, and I don't think anyone's really talked since they signed him in terms of what they are thinking. But there's a guy that's had a couple seasons above average on offense, a few seasons middling, and fills the role of a guy that can play second or third, right-handed bat. That maybe there's a couple things I like about his swing, and maybe there's something they can tweak about it. And yeah, at the end of the day, like, it's a low-cost signing. So if Edmund's fine opening day, they do end up re-signing Kike, and he's ready to go in May, and they don't have room on the roster, that's very easy for them to just part ways.
Yeah, $1.2 million is kind of just pennies to the Dodgers at this point, even if they are getting taxed at 110% due to being in the third tier of the CBT threshold, along with also being over that tier for, a couple years in a row now. So they're getting taxed heavy, so almost double. It's interesting because it's a guy that not many people, unless you really, covet the sport and follow it, you wouldn't know who this guy is. I mean, even I had to do my due diligence and do some research and find out, what he did in Detroit, and he has come up with some good hits. I posted on Twitter of, his go ahead double off of Josh Hader in the 2024 wild card series. So big spot. He came through, has been pretty average in terms with the bat for his last 3 years with Detroit. I believe 93 WRC plus over the last 3 seasons. So respectable, not the best, but I think the ability to have a person or a player that's versatile, that can play multiple positions, especially early on in the year, where you have Tommy Edman, who I imagine is probably going to open up the year on the IL, whether it's 15-day or 60-day, that remains to be seen when he gets to camp. Kike Hernandez, who I imagine they are going to re-sign once the 60-day IL opens. They're saying reports that he may not even be ready until like June. So you pretty much can keep him on the shelf, have him get ready and healthy, and you only want him there for October and the late stretch run in the regular season and the postseason. So we'll see how far he can, Ibáñez gets run to play. It does make me agree with you where it's like, how much faith do they have in Haesung Kim? Alex Freeland's a guy who can play multiple infield positions as well. Did they just not like the sample size that they saw from last year? Because he did struggle with the bat, even though he was decent with the glove and able to play third base, second base, shortstop if needed. It does make you wonder those questions. And that's another point to what we mentioned about spring training, positional battles. We're going to be seeing some of these guys battling for spots, especially on that Dodgers bench. Haesung Kim has options. I know he has a really good fandom out there in the Dodgers, landscape, including myself. So it makes spring training interesting. So we'll see what he does and how long he has to stay here in Dodger blue. But at the end of the day, you can't really argue with the signing. It's the same thing with Ryan Fitzgerald, who they also claimed off waivers from the Minnesota Twins. He ended up being the guy that they DFA'd to make room on the 40-man roster for. However, it's a little bit interesting with him because he's never been outrighted to the minor leagues before. He still has minor league options. So what they can do, even though they placed him on waivers again, if he's not claimed, they can just outright him to minor league camp. So I imagine he's going to be a non-roster invitee for spring training. So we'll still see him sticking around. And if needed, eventually, whether in the middle of the season, the beginning of the season, they could add him to the 40-man roster. So any thoughts on Fitzgerald? Kind of gets brought into the Dodgers, gets announced, and then gets DFA'd almost a week later.
Yeah, we're seeing a lot of this around baseball where guys are getting claimed, getting DFA'd. Hope the team is hoping he clears waivers. I mean, it just happened with Big Christmas and John Kenzie Noel. He got DFA'd by the Guardians. The Orioles picked him up, then the Orioles DFA'd him, and then he did clear waivers, so they were able to outright him. So it's just a sign of the times right now where people are trying to sneak through guys and keep them on the roster for depth purposes. And, but I don't want to completely dismiss anything because, as we all know, the Dodgers have found guys before that helped out. I'm sure, the Chris Taylor trade at the time. I don't think I was on, I forget what podcast I was doing back then, but I think we kind of dismissed it, and it ended up becoming a really big thing. So, but yeah, the Dodgers are going to do anything they can to build depth. The other day I played a Sporkle quiz, trying to name every Dodger from 2025 that played in at least one game, and I didn't get 100%. I got at the end of the night something 90%, but you just forget how many random guys play in a season, and Ryan Fitzgerald could be one of those random guys that plays in a Dodger season.
You tell me people don't remember 2024 World Series champion Nick Ahmed. Come on, like you're correct.
At least he had a moment. He hit that home run against the Giants, but
yeah. You get that sense of there's always so many random players that just end up, making their mark on the team. And that's what Dave Roberts does a really good job for when he speaks to the team in spring training. So he's like, hey, you may not make the team on opening day. You may not be here at the end of the season, but at some point in the year, we may need you to throw an inning or two, or we may need you to come for a pinch hit appearance off the bench, or you may have to fill in for an injured starter. It's really just an organizational depth thing with the Dodgers, and they're one of the few teams that kind of has the ability and the flexibility to do that across, whether it's the pitching staff or the positional player side. Fitzgerald, though, there is a little bit to like about him. He is 31 years old, so it's really kind of up there in age for like a career minor leaguer. Did get his chance to shine with the Twins a little bit this past season. Had a 758 OPS, has a little bit of pop, but batting average was under 200 for any, of our old fashioned statisticians out there that look at that. Other thing, he looks almost like James Outman. So I feel like that's going to get a lot of fans that were fans of James Outman, including us here on the show, friend of the Carne Asada. But we'll see what happens in spring training if he can make his mark there. Nothing else really to go with that. But now we can get into the bread and butter of this episode and kind of everything we've heard over the last couple of days, and that's Kyle Tucker. You're looking at your phone, I assume, over the past couple of days. You're probably got it propped up on your computer right now to see if we get any breaking news like I do. Everything you've seen, what is your takeaways from just the Kyle Tucker market? And are you surprised that the Dodgers, one, are still being reported as lurking around, and two, we haven't heard any reports of whether they've offered him a contract, years, or dollars connected to the Dodgers? Good news or bad news?
Yeah, I'm surprised. I don't know. The fact that we haven't heard anything, I'm surprised that they're still kind of being one of the teams mentioned. Was we've seen with some of these big name guys in recent years that, teams do start kind of just getting dropped off as potential guys, and then by the end of it, like Otani, who ended up being, Blue Jays, Dodgers, everyone kind of knew it was between those. And then we got some false reports and some confusion around some flight stuff. But yeah, I'm as a for the Dodgers, we've heard 50 million from the Mets side. We've heard the length up to 10 years on the Blue Jays side. We haven't really heard anything from the Dodgers side concrete other than short-term high AAV, which we all kind of expected. So, yeah, I'm interested. Scott Boras is not going to drop the Dodgers if he doesn't have to as a potential, or no, he's not Boras, but an agent is not going to drop the Dodgers as a potential guy if he doesn't have to. And that's probably what it is here. I don't know. I'm not. Let's just say this: if the Dodgers sign Kyle Tucker, I'm not gonna be surprised. But as of right now, I just don't feel it. But again, that's based on the fact that we don't have these reports. If somebody reported right now, oh, the Dodgers have a 6-year, $45 million AAV on the whatever, then I'd be like, oh, maybe the Dodgers do have a chance. But I don't see that being realistic. I just think the Dodgers are gonna bank on, hey, Kyle Tucker, if you don't want to be one of the main guys, if you don't want to be in New York, you don't want to be in Toronto, or you want to come to a spot where you have a chance to legitimately win a World Series, then we're here for you. I think that's kind of where it's at.
Yeah, I think my takeaways, kind of going back and forth here, for the rest of the episode on this and like other free agents. I'm trying to think GM wise, like, all right, how is this contract information getting put out there? Is it something that the teams are leaking out to kind of try to get leverage? Is it something from Kyle Tucker's camp that's trying to get leverage? Also, be a reminder. I know a lot of people get confused with this, especially with a guy that's looking for a lot of money in a long-term deal. His agent is not Scott Boras, so that is something that you can take away as well. So he is probably willing to sign. Short-term deal is what's being reported for the Mets, and they're kind of getting pretty crazy from what we've seen out there. I think Robert Murray was one of the first ones to kind of put it out there on FanSided, saying they're looking for a 3 or 4 year deal at $50 million per year. That would pretty much, I believe, be number 2 in terms of AAV, right behind Ohtani, or maybe number 3 behind Juan Soto with his deal as well. So Steve Cohen and the Mets, they're getting a little crazy. I would say a little bit desperate trying to push that figure up there. But I mean, if you're trying to, win back your fan base of having a bad offseason, losing multiple players on your team, fan favorites, Edwin Diaz, Pete Alonso, Brendan Nimmo, like, you kind of got to reel them back in. And Steve Cohen knows what he has, and that's money right now. And it seems like for whatever reason, nobody wants to give Kyle Tucker that long-term deal. Jeff Passan, put it out. He was on Sportsnet in Toronto today saying, the Blue Jays are probably the only team offering him a long-term deal, and it's also approaching 10 years. We've heard some things about Kyle Tucker, maybe that his heart's not fully into the game, and that's probably what steered a lot of, teams away from it. Like you said with the Dodgers, they're probably saying, hey, look, we'll offer you a short-term deal. We'll give you a decent payday, around $40 million a year is what I'm thinking. But you're really just playing here to reset your market, establish it again, opt out, maybe after each season, go out back in the open market again, win a championship with the Dodgers. You're not going to be needed to be the guy as you would be if you joined the Mets. You would pretty much be the second guy on that team that people look in each and every day. So I'm curious to see where he signs. I'm leaning that it's probably going to be, I still think it's going to be the Blue Jays. That's my thought, is that he's just going to take the long-term deal. But, $50 million a year, even if it only is just for 1 or 2 years, that's like, I'm no economist, but getting 50 million or $100 million up front is better than just, getting it spread out over 10 years. So I think if you're Kyle Tucker and his agent, you kind of have to take that into consideration. And if he's really going to take a short-term deal and it's not about the dollars, I don't see why he would choose the Mets over the Dodgers. And this is maybe my bias getting into it, but it just doesn't make sense to me if that's the case.
Yeah, the other thing with it now, and it's crazy how media and narratives and social media can kind of drive things, or at least seemingly drive things. Is like, if I'm Kyle Tucker now, I'm thinking about, oh, the first slump I have with the Mets, there's going to be articles like, oh, he doesn't love the game, or, all those articles are going to come out. It might happen with the Dodgers, but you're probably not going to really notice, because, he's not going to sign a record breaking deal with the Dodgers. He's going to sign, a normal ish deal. That's not going to be anything like, 700 mil. So you're not going to really hear that. If he goes to the Blue Jays, probably longer term, a little bit smaller AAV, could be similar to where when he struggles, I don't think you really hear. So like, New York media, New York market is different, even if it is the Mets and not the Yankees. And, if I'm a guy like Tucker, I might be thinking about that. Like, okay, this narrative about me is already out there. If I go to the Mets and I do struggle, that narrative is going to grow and grow even more. And not saying that played into Anthony Rendon, because he did have legitimate injuries, or seemingly legitimate injuries, but I'm sure, like, when he said all that stuff and everything kind of grew, and and he's deciding, do I want to rehab and play 2026, or do I want to just take my money and chill? I'm sure he probably thought, well, let me just take my money and chill, like, if I don't need to. So I think that could play a small part of it. I think the Mets are to me, it's weird that the Mets are gonna pony up 50 mil on to Cal Tucker, on top of already paying, Juan Soto what they paid him, but they won't give a long-term contract to a pitcher that's not going to be that high AAV. Like Framber Valdez, you give him 8 years at 25 mil, like that's not as much money, and not as much, there's risk, but I just don't see what their thought process is, your David Stern's thought process is. But yeah, I'm thinking Blue Jays mostly because Bo Bichette is like not linked to the Blue Jays at all anymore, really. And you would think that if they're not, they would be in on both guys, uh, and they're not really hearing that. So.
Yeah, I feel like it's kind of for the Blue Jays, they're the team that can offer them the long-term deal where it fits the most. And then even though the Dodgers have a hole in the outfield, it kind of makes you wonder like how much do they really want Kyle Tucker, or how much is it just saying, well, we're the Dodgers, we're a big market team. We have to at least keep you enticed and offer you a contract to set your market. But hey, if you can fall into our terms, which is a short-term high AAV deal, I mean, hell, for 1 or 2 years and we're paying you $40 million, you add in the 110% tax for this year and most likely next year as well. I mean, if the Dodgers can get us another World Series ring or two and cap off a three-peat and solidify their dynasty of this decade, I mean, at the end of the day, the front office is probably going to say, hey, look, our return of investment from Otani and this last 2 years has been more than what we've anticipated. We got money to spend. Andrew Friedman's pretty much alluded to that as well, saying, hey, look, traditionally I wouldn't sign a closer for this amount of money, even though it feels like we got Edwin Diaz on a bargain. But he gave him the contract and said, hey, here, we got some room to play. So if Tucker can fall into their laps, awesome. If not, this team on paper is still built to win the World Series. They're still the World Series favorite. Marginal improvements, while it won't be, I wouldn't say it makes us sound spoiled, where it's like we're not going to like it, but signing a 1 year deal on Harrison Bader or someone else, or hell, even giving Ryan Ward a shot. I put that poll out on social media the other day too. I said, hey, if your opening day outfield is Teoscar Hernandez in right, Andy Pages in center, and Ryan Ward in left field, like, are you going to hate that? Defensively, probably, but I feel like I'm saying that's probably more chance of happening than them signing Kyle Tucker right now. I feel like it's not going to happen. I don't expect them to get a big free agent this offseason, but the Dodgers always shock us. So I wouldn't be surprised if they do have a move or two up their sleeve. I mean, there's only a couple weeks until spring training here.
Yeah, yeah. I'm just waiting for Tucker sets up the market for Bichette, which sets up the market for others, and that'll kind of lead us into February when teams start reporting. You kind of want to have guys there, but yeah, I'll be happy if they sign Kyle Tucker, but I'm not pounding the table for it. It's just it kind of is what it is, and we are lucky to be in that position because we remember the offseason before Otani, when they didn't really get anybody, and we were, some fans were upset, some more than others. And I always think, like, with the Dodgers, like everything that's kind of not gone their way, Harper not taking a short-term high AV, Rendon not wanting the Hollywood lifestyle, all these little things that happened all led to where we're at. So, like, as a Dodgers fan, you're kind of thinking, like, well, if they don't get him, they're probably going to get somebody else. And then, they're going to end up with, Byron Buxton at the deadline, or like something that doesn't normally happen unless right now you're a fan of the Dodgers.
Yeah, so we'll see what happens. It seems like the Tucker news is going to come pretty much either tonight, late tonight, or tomorrow, or sometime this week before the weekend, which is good because whether he chooses the Dodgers or not, he's not a free agent of my thinking that should be saying, let's get the countdown for Tucker watch. I just haven't felt that way. I've just kind of been waiting for him to sign to set the rest of the market.
Yeah, I'm not
he
staying up
controls.
late for Kyle Tucker news.
Yeah, he controls Bo Bichette, who controls the rest of like the 1 to 2 year guys. Because once the Dodgers, if they lose out on one of those guys, or if the Phillies lose out on Bo Bichette, then they have to kind of start going into a second gear of plan B or C and saying, hey, look, we missed out on this player. Now we got to kind of re-up and see if we're going to get this guy and they're going to join us on whatever 1 to 2 year deals that they're looking for. So it'll be interesting over the next couple of days to see what happens. I mean, this app would probably explode on social media if the Dodgers ended up getting Tucker. I think Tucker even signing for $50 million a year with the Mets is going to break the app as well. So hopefully we get the news tonight shortly after this episode concludes. But Spring training is right around the corner. Super Bowl's, approaching as well. We got divisional week, Saturday and Sunday should be great. Any closing thoughts, Vince, before we get out of here?
Shout or congrats to the Muncies, another baby Muncie in the world. It's good to see positive baby news in the Dodger world. And today was the signing for the international players. The Dodgers uh, signed a bunch of guys that we're not going to know about until probably 1 or 2 years in, when they kind of start making their ways into prospect lists, and then we'll see what happens from there. But I will say it's been a while since, or a long time really, since they really had a guy that they signed that was like hyped that ended up being something. Some of the smaller guys that they signed end up maybe being something. But yeah, I mean, little Dodger stuff is happening all the time, but it's like the draft. Like, you don't really know what's going to happen until a few years down the line.
Yeah, that's kind of the way it works in the MLB world, for unless you're a super dedicated fan like us. Speaking of all the international stuff for the Dodgers, we'll definitely have that up on our website as well, DodgersBeat.com. So if you want to check out that for all the news, updates, and latest rumors, that's all going to be on the website as well, along with us talking about it here, whether on Talking Blue with me and Vince or on the Bleed Los podcast. So hopefully we get some news here. Anything that involves the Dodgers, we'll try our best to, do a breaking news live stream. If not, we'll try to get it soon after that. But that'll do it for this episode. We'll be back soon this week, hopefully next week, and if we get any news. But that'll do it for us here. We'll see you soon on the next one. Have a good one.